Hi everyone, sorry I'm out again today. I'm on a field trip with my Avid kiddos. So right now you should have already grabbed a Chrome, you should be sitting with your partner, you should have themes and construction out, and if you'd like to take notes, some optional paper. These slides that I'm going to go over are slides 38 through 52 on the Gatsby reading guide. I strongly suggest that you follow along. I'm also going to put a link to this video on slide 38 because I'm going to talk incredibly fast. Please ask Ms. Gervais to pause the video at any point if you feel like that would be helpful. Or again, you can go back to slide 38 and play it for yourself. Let's get started. Today you're going to finish practice paragraph 1. Yesterday you should have read themes and construction. You should have figured out highlighted characters that you're interested in, underlined CDs about those characters. You should have scanned through your highlights, decided on two characters to use, and brainstormed a total of 3 CDs to use in your practice paragraph. When I'm done talking, if you have not done number 3, the brainstorm of 3 possible CDs to use in your practice paragraph, that is where you need to start for practice paragraph number 1. Okay? So I'm not going to go over themes in construction. I feel like it's a pretty straightforward read, but we should talk about primary versus secondary sources. So primary versus secondary sources. That's not the slide I wanted. Let's try again. Primary versus secondary sources. You use them in history when you study events like World War I. If you are in your junior paper right now, you are up to your eyeballs in secondary sources. So when you study an event, a primary source is something like a soldier's journal, a president's letter, somebody who has experienced that event firsthand. Then your secondary sources are things like newspaper articles, scholarly articles, reports about the soldier's experience, or interpretations of the president's letter. So they're called secondary sources because they rely on the primary sources to report out information to the general public. We use primary and secondary sources in English as well, but we don't study events. We study ideas. So, for example, hope. Primary documents about hope might be, I don't know, works of fiction like The Great Gatsby. So through works of fiction like hope, we're understanding, for example, Fitzgerald's firsthand experience with hope. Secondary sources then would be literary criticisms, because literary criticisms explain Fitzgerald's firsthand experience with hope. Hopefully, after you read Themes in Construction yesterday, you've got a better idea of what Fitzgerald was going for. Here's the big difference between English and history. In English, you directly cite primary sources, you directly cite secondary sources with the option to paraphrase secondary sources. In history, you directly cite primary sources and you only paraphrase secondary sources. Do not directly cite secondary sources in history. Why that is, I don't know. I just work here on that one. For English, you can directly cite both, but you have the option to paraphrase secondary documents. So let's get back to practice paragraph 1, where you're going to actually have to cite this stuff. So our primary source for practice paragraph 1 is going to be Gatsby. Your secondary source is themes and construction. You are limited right now to those 2 sources. So let's get to your paragraph. On this slide, you see a reminder of the parts of your body paragraph. This slide might be helpful because it goes through all 3 questions you need to answer with commentary. Creating your support thesis is really, really important for your body paragraph because it guides the whole thing and the paragraph is really, really long. This slide has the entire process, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a template for your support thesis. So let's go through an example. So say I want to compare Daisy and Myrtle in my practice paragraph 1. Okay, so I find 2 primary CDs. So the first one is her face was sad and lovely with bright things in it, bright eyes and a bright passionate mouth. But there was an excitement in her voice that men who had cared for her found difficult to forget. Clearly Daisy. The second CD, her face above a spotted dress of dark blue crepe de chine, contained no facet or gleam of beauty, but there was an immediately perceptible vitality about her, as if the nerves of her body were continually smoldering. Clearly Myrtle. Note, this is how you cite author's last name, page number. So the thing that makes these two CDs really great is they are about our two characters, Daisy and Myrtle. They're also similar in that they both describe the character's physical appearance. That that similarity is going to make pointing out a contrast in my commentary way easier because I can talk about how Daisy gets a really pleasant description, Myrtle gets a really unflattering description. So those are my primary CDs. Knowing that I'm looking at Daisy and Myrtle, I go to themes and construction to see what I can find about Daisy and Myrtle. I find this one, a perfect dream, Daisy, who for him embodied the elements of success. Okay, great, that mentions Daisy by name. And then I find Tom and Daisy Buchanan were unfair, corrupt, and materialistic. Ooh, okay, so Daisy is a perfect dream in this CD and materialistic in this CD. I didn't find much on Myrtle, so I'm going to have to work with what I've got because right now I'm limited to that source. So step 2 then is to figure out, well, what do these CDs have in common and what is the relationship between the themes in the CDs? Okay, so let's look at the CDs. Key terms, perfect dream, success, unfair, corrupt, materialistic, lovely and bright themes, excitement, no facet or gleam of beauty, ooh, sucks for Myrtle, vitality, and smoldering. FYI, smoldering is a fancy way of saying really sexy. Okay, so let's make some connections then. In the secondary CD, Daisy is a perfect dream. In my primary CD, she's described as lovely. Okay, she's also described as embodying the elements of success. Okay, that seems to also fit with being described as lovely and bright. So it seems like there's a correlation between her physical appearance and then what she seems to represent, a dream or success. Now you have to keep in mind that we also know that Daisy is a gold digger. She married Tom clearly for the money because she allows him to cheat and so on and be mean to her. Now that's in the second CD. Tom and Daisy are materialistic. So the materialistic doesn't seem to match with this lovely and bright description of Daisy, but it does seem to match with Myrtle's description that she's not beautiful, but she's vital and really smoldering. So it almost seems like they have Daisy and Myrtle are both greedy. They're with Tom for the money, but Daisy gets this flattering portrayal while Myrtle gets this ugly portrayal. And it seems to be because Myrtle is the materialistic side and Daisy is this perfect dream of success side, even though we know that's not real. Okay, so here's how I've written it out. The relationship seems to be that Daisy gets to be the perfect dream of success because she's able to look perfect. And society seems to value materialism, but doesn't want to admit it. So they like Daisy because she looks nice, but they don't like Myrtle because she's crass. So one way I've put that in a sentence is the facade of perfection is more valuable than honesty, because we would call Daisy ugly if we were honest, in a society that values materialism. Ooh, there's Fitzgerald's argument. So after you've figured out the relationship between the themes and the argument, go figure out the lit device. This is often the easiest one. So these are two physical descriptions. It must be characterization. And put it all together in a support thesis. Here's your template. Here's what this one would look like put together. Through the use of characterization, Fitzgerald argues that the facade of perfection, mask of perfection, is more valuable than honesty in a society that values materialism. So I went from this draft of an argument here to a full-out support thesis here using the template. Getting the support thesis correct and comprehensive is important. You need to be able to point out all these relationships that you figure out in your CDs because that's the rock that your commentary is built on. Mr. Simpson is fabulous at this. Mrs. Gervais was my student teacher last year. She is fantastic at this. So ask for the help that you need today to get this ST right. The next slide are templates for transitions and lead-ins. Note that the template for secondary sources is a little bit different because you don't need to offer context for what the characters are talking about. The next slide has a sample paragraph on it. This sample paragraph is an A paragraph. It's a slide 51 if you're following along on the reading guide, and I strongly recommend that you read it. All you have to do is click here and you'll see the class view. Feel free to make your own copy if you want to annotate it. You'll notice that there are CDs highlighted in yellow, CDs highlighted in blue. The yellow CDs are primary CDs. The blue CDs are secondary CDs. These CDs are perfectly embedded. The author of this also puts most of the CDs in the the beginning half of the paragraph and most of the commentary in the second half of the paragraph. You are welcome to do that as well. If that scares you a little bit, that's totally fine. You can also rely on typical essay format. Read the sample body paragraph before you get started. It gives you an idea of the type and depth of comparisons that I'm looking for. You can also steal some ideas from it if you'd like. You cannot directly copy it. That is plagiarism. Here's a reminder of our traditional paragraph outline. I strongly suggest that you make these first two CDs your primary CDs. So in our example, we could do a Daisy CD and a Myrtle CD, and then close with your secondary CDs. Because remember, the purpose of a secondary CD is to either legitimize your argument or add to your argument. So it's often best at the end. Thanks for listening. Again, this is all on slide 38 if you need to repeat any parts of it. Also, Mrs. Gervais is fantastic. Please ask her for help as well as Mr. Simpson. Thank you.